The front door opened with its familiar soft click. I shifted the heavy grocery bags in my arms, a triumphant smile on my face. My last appointment of the day had been canceled, a small gift from the universe that meant I could get a head start on a special dinner for Ben. I kicked the door shut with my heel, my mind already running through the recipe when I heard it. It was a sound so out of place in our happy, sunlit home that it stopped me dead in the hallway. A sob. A raw, choked, and utterly broken sound. My heart seized in my chest. I set the groceries down on the floor, the rustle of the paper bags sounding impossibly loud in the sudden, tense silence. I crept forward, my sneakers making no noise on the hardwood floor. The sound was coming from the kitchen. My first thought was that he was hurt, that something terrible had happened. I peered around the corner of the doorway, my body hidden, my breath held tight in my lungs. And I saw him. My husband, Ben, stood with his back to me, leaning heavily against the kitchen sink. His broad shoulders, the same shoulders I had always seen as a symbol of strength and safety, were shaking with uncontrollable tremors. His head was bowed, his free hand gripping the edge of the counter so tightly his knuckles were white. He was holding his phone to his ear. Tears were streaming down his face, catching the afternoon light as they fell, silent and constant. I had never seen him cry. Not once in the 7 years we had been together, not at his grandfather's funeral, not when we were overwhelmed with the stress of renovating the house, not even in movies. Ben was my rock, my steady, cheerful, unshakable Ben. Seeing him like this, so completely undone, felt like watching the sun fall from the sky. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the scene. Who was he talking to? What could possibly have broken him like this? My feet were frozen to the floor, my body paralyzed by a mixture of fear and a terrible, creeping dread. I knew I should step into the room, wrap my arms around him, and ask what was wrong. But I couldn't move. I could only watch, a helpless intruder in my own home. Then, through the sound of his ragged breaths, I heard him speak. His voice was thick with an anguish so profound it physically hurt me to hear it. I can't keep lying to her, Daniel. Daniel, his brother. A wave of confusion washed over me. What lie? What were they talking about? It's eating me alive, Ben choked out, his voice cracking on the last word. Every single day. I look at her and she's so happy, she trusts me so completely, and I'm lying to her. The world tilted on its axis. The bright, cheerful kitchen seemed to warp and fade, the colors draining away until all that was left was the gray, sickening reality of his words. Lying to her. She trusts me completely. He was talking about me. My mind, a frantic, terrified thing, leaped to the only conclusion it could find, the one that every betrayed wife in history has reached. An affair. It had to be. The late nights, he said, were spent at the office, the hushed phone calls he'd dismissed as work stress, the sudden, uncharacteristic jumpiness, it all clicked into place, forming a monstrous, ugly picture. He wasn't talking to his brother about some abstract problem, he was confessing. He was in love with someone else. The air in my lungs turned to poison. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs, felt like it had been encased in ice. The man I loved, the man I had built my entire life with, the man I trusted more than anyone in the world, was standing in our kitchen, crying over another woman. The groceries at my feet, the ingredients for a celebration of our love, were now just a sad, pathetic reminder of my own foolishness. The silence in the house stretched on, broken only by the sound of my husband's weeping and the shattering of my own heart. Our life was a beautiful painting. It was a canvas we had stretched together, filled with the vibrant colors of laughter, partnership, and a deep, uncomplicated love. We had met in college, a clumsy, sweet collision of two lives that just seemed to fit. For 7 years, we had been building our masterpiece, our first tiny apartment, our wedding under a canopy of old oak trees, and finally, this house, our dream home, which we had spent the last year renovating with our own hands. Ben was the architect of our joy. He was the one who could always make me laugh, even on my worst days. He was the one who would leave little notes for me on the bathroom mirror, simple messages like, "Have a great day," or "You're my favorite," that never failed to make me smile. He remembered everything: the name of my difficult client, my favorite brand of tea, the anniversary of the day we adopted our scruffy dog, Buster. He was my biggest cheerleader, the first person I would show my illustrations to, his praise always genuine and his critiques always gentle. Our partnership was a seamless dance. I worked from my studio at home, lost in worlds of color and character, while he went off to his job as a structural engineer, a man who built bridges and ensured buildings wouldn't fall. When he came home, he would leave the stress of his work at the door, his face lighting up the moment he saw me. We shared everything: our hopes, our fears, our silly everyday stories. Our marriage was built on a foundation of absolute honesty, a bedrock of trust that I believed was unshakable. There were no secrets between us. Or so I had thought. Looking back now, through the fractured lens of his confession, the tiny cracks in our perfect painting began to appear. They had been there for months, I realized, small fissures that I had willfully ignored. There was a new tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He had started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. When I'd hold him and ask what was wrong, he'd just shake his head, pull me closer and whisper, "Just a bad dream, work stress." The phone calls had started too. He would be laughing with me one moment, and the next, his phone would buzz, and he would glance at the screen, his expression immediately hardening. He'd get up and walk into another room to take the call, his voice a low, urgent murmur that I couldn't quite make out. When he returned, the laughter would be gone, replaced by that same strained, worried look. "Just a problem with the new bridge project," he'd say, forcing a smile. "Don't worry about it." And I didn't, because I trusted him. I believed him. When my steady Ben, told me not to worry, I listened. I attributed his jumpiness to the pressure of his job, his fatigue to long hours. I had told myself that every marriage goes through periods of stress and that my role as a loving wife was to be patient and supportive, not suspicious and nagging. I had accepted his explanations without question because the alternative, that he was lying to me, was simply unthinkable. It was a possibility that did not exist in the beautiful world we had built. Now, that world lay in ruins. Every note he had left, every supportive word, every loving gesture was now tainted, recast in a sinister new light. Was his love a lie, too? Was our entire life a carefully constructed performance? The trust I had placed in him, the very bedrock of my existence, had been a foundation of sand. And as I stood there, frozen in the hallway, listening to him weep for a life that didn't include me, I felt it all wash away, leaving me stranded and utterly alone. The rustle of the grocery bag was the only sound I made, a small, insignificant noise that cut through the silence like a gunshot. Ben's head snapped up. He spun around, his eyes wide and bloodshot, his face a mess of tears and shock. He saw me standing in the doorway, and the color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, pale gray. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He quickly wiped at his face with the back of his hand, a futile gesture to erase the evidence of his breakdown. I didn't hear you come in." I didn't move. I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the spot, my body a rigid pillar of ice. The image of him, so broken and weeping, was seared into my mind, but the initial wave of fear and pity had been consumed by a hot, white-hot rage. "Who is she, Ben?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like my own. It was flat, cold, and dangerously calm. He stared at me, his face a mask of genuine, unadulterated confusion. "What? Who?" "The woman you were crying about," I said, taking a step into the kitchen. The groceries were forgotten on the floor behind me. "The one you're lying to me about. Don't play dumb with me. I heard you. I heard everything." A flicker of understanding, followed by sheer panic, crossed his face. "Chloe, no," he said, taking a step toward me, his hands outstretched. It's not what you think. I swear to you, it's not that. Isn't it? I shot back, my voice rising. Then what is it? What lie is so terrible it has you sobbing in the kitchen like your world is ending? What could possibly be worse than cheating on your wife? He stopped, his face a terrible canvas of conflict and despair. He looked trapped, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. He couldn't tell me. I could see it in his eyes. He couldn't tell me the truth. The realization was a fresh stab of pain. Even now, caught red-handed, he was going to lie to me again. And he did. He let out a long, shuddering breath, his shoulders slumping in a picture of defeat. He ran a hand through his hair, his gaze falling to the floor. When he looked back at me, his eyes were filled with a carefully crafted expression of shame. "You're right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I have been lying to you, and I am so sorry." He didn't confess to an affair. He confessed to something else, a lie that was clearly designed to be more forgivable, more manageable. He told me that months ago he had taken a large portion of our savings, the money we had earmarked for our future, and invested it in a high-risk tech stock a friend had recommended. He said he had been sure it was a sure thing, a way to fast-track our financial goals, but the stock had plummeted, and he had lost everything. "I lost almost $50,000, Chloe," he said, his voice thick with shame. "I was so embarrassed, so ashamed. I've been trying to earn it back, working extra hours, taking on side projects without you knowing. The call. That was me telling Daniel I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The guilt of losing our money, of lying to you about it, it just became too much." He looked at me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "I swear to you, Chloe, there's no one else. There has never been anyone else. It was just money. Stupid, stupid money." I listened to his confession, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. A part of me, the part that loved him so desperately, was flooded with a dizzying sense of relief. It wasn't another woman. He hadn't betrayed our vows. But that relief was quickly followed by a cold, sharp anger. He had lied to me for months. He had gambled away our future. He had treated me not as a partner, but as a child who needed to be protected from his mistakes. $50,000? I whispered, the number sounding foreign and obscene. "You lost our money and you didn't think I deserved to know?" "I was going to fix it," he pleaded. "I didn't want you to worry." I just stared at him, at the man I thought I knew. The perfect partnership, the foundation of trust. It was all a lie. Maybe not the lie I had first imagined, but a deep, damaging lie nonetheless. A crack had appeared in the foundation of our life, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. But for now, exhausted and heartbroken, I cautiously accepted the story he was selling. It was a betrayal I could almost understand. It was a problem we could, maybe, work through together. In the days that followed, a fragile truce settled over our home. It was a quiet, brittle peace, filled with the things we weren't saying. We moved around each other like strangers, our usual easy banter replaced by a polite, cautious distance. Ben was a ghost of himself, overly attentive and apologetic, his eyes constantly searching my face for signs of forgiveness. I was numb, caught between the relief that he hadn't cheated and the cold, lingering anger of his betrayal. After a week of walking on eggshells, I couldn't stand it anymore. The uncertainty was eating away at me. I needed to see the damage for myself, to understand the full scope of the mess he had made. If we were going to fix this, we had to do it together. I told him I wanted to go over all of our financial records. "Chloe, you don't have to do that," he said quickly, a flicker of his old panic returning. "I'll handle it. It's my mess." "No, Ben," I said, my voice firm. "It's our mess now. You made it that way when you lied to me. I need to see it. All of it." He finally relented. Though his reluctance was a heavy presence in the room, he logged into our online banking portal and pulled up the statements for our joint savings and investment accounts. He left me alone in my studio, the glowing screen of the monitor casting a cold light on my face. My hands trembled as I took the mouse. I felt like an archaeologist about to uncover the wreckage of a lost city. I started with the investment portfolio where he said he had made the reckless trade. I braced myself, expecting to see a massive withdrawal, a huge, glaring red number that represented the $50,000 he had lost. I scrolled back through the transaction history, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. There was nothing. The balance was exactly what it should have been. In fact, thanks to the market, it had grown slightly. There were no records of any large withdrawals, no failed trades, no sign of any catastrophic loss whatsoever. A cold, sick feeling started to creep up my spine. Maybe he used a different account. I clicked over to our main savings account, the one we had been building for years. I scanned the transaction logs, my eyes moving faster and faster. Every deposit was there, every transfer was accounted for. Our money, all of it, was safe. It was all there. The lie about the stock market loss was another lie. The air rushed out of my lungs. I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. Why? Why would he lie about lying? If he hadn't lost the money, then what was he so guilty about? What was so terrible that he had to invent a $50,000 lie to cover it up? The first lie had been a crack in our foundation. This second, pointless lie was a chasm, and I was standing on the edge, staring into a dark, terrifying abyss. My mind went back to the kitchen, to the raw, unfiltered anguish on his face. That kind of pain wasn't about a made-up financial loss. It was real, it was deep, and it had nothing to do with the story he had told me. The affair, the horrible, gut-wrenching thought came rushing back, stronger this time. He had only lied about the money to throw me off the scent, to give me a more palatable betrayal to swallow, while he continued to lie about the real one. Driven by a new, cold wave of suspicion, I got up and walked to his home office. The room was neat and tidy, just as he always left it. I didn't know what I was looking for, just something that didn't fit. My eyes scanned the shelves, the desk, the framed blueprints on the wall. Then I saw it. Under his desk, tucked away in the shadows, was a small gray metal box. It was a simple fireproof lockbox, the kind you buy at an office supply store. He had always told me it was where he kept old, sensitive engineering drafts from his first job. I had never had any reason to question it. Until now, a powerful, undeniable urge came over me. I had to know what was inside. It was a violation of his privacy, a line I had never dreamed I would cross. But he had already crossed that line himself, again and again. My trust was a shattered thing on the floor. I knelt down and pulled the box out into the light. It was locked, of course, but this time I wasn't going to just accept his story. I was going to find the key. I felt like a criminal in my own home. My heart hammered against my ribs as I began to search his office, my movements furtive and guilty. I ran my hands along the tops of bookshelves, checked inside desk drawers, and sifted through pencil holders, all while my mind screamed at me for this gross violation of his privacy. But a stronger voice, a colder and more insistent one, urged me on. The truth, whatever it was worth finding. The lies had to stop. After 10 minutes of fruitless searching, I was about to give up. I slumped into his desk chair, defeated, my eyes scanning the rows of books on the shelf opposite me. There were engineering textbooks, biographies of famous architects, and a small collection of old, hardcover novels. One of them, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, my favorite book, a gift I had given him years ago, was sticking out just a fraction of an inch more than the others. On a whim, I walked over and pulled it from the shelf. It felt strangely light. I opened the cover, and my breath caught in my throat. The center of the book had been hollowed out, a perfect rectangular cavity carved into its pages, and nestled inside, small and silver, was a key. My hands trembled as I took the key and knelt again before the gray metal box. It fit the lock perfectly. With a deep, shaky breath, I turned it. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to cannon through the silent house. I lifted the lid. There were no engineering drafts. There were no blueprints. The box was filled with a collection of old, yellowed papers, held together with a crumbling rubber band. They looked ancient. I carefully lifted them out. The top document was a legal partnership agreement, dated over 20 years ago. My father's name was on it, along with a name I didn't recognize, Arthur Morrison. This was strange. My father had been a simple, small-town architect his whole life. I had never heard him speak of any business partner. I sifted through the other papers. There were newspaper clippings, all from the same time period, all from a city hundreds of miles away. The headlines jumped out at me, each one more confusing than the last. "Pioneering software patent disputed," read one. "Morrison accuses partner of theft," read another. A story began to emerge, a story that made no sense. It was about a bitter corporate battle over a revolutionary piece of software, something that could change the tech industry forever. According to the articles, Mr. Morrison was claiming his partner, my father, had stolen the patent, cheated him out of a fortune, and then vanished. I sat back on my heels, my head spinning. My father? An architect who was afraid of his own computer? A software patent? It was impossible. This had to be about a different man who just happened to share his name. It had to be. Then, at the very bottom of the pile, I found a more recent document. It was a letter, printed on crisp, modern paper. It was addressed not to my father, but to Ben. My heart began to pound. The letter was dated just 3 months ago, right around the time Ben's stress and nightmares had started. I unfolded it. The words were typed, cold and menacing. "I know you married his daughter. I know you live in that nice little house. I've been away for a long time, but I'm out now, and I haven't forgotten what her father did to me. He stole my life, and he stole my fortune. I know she has it. I know he left it to her. Tell your wife the time has come to pay her father's debt. I will be in touch." It was signed, simply, Morrison. I dropped the letter as if it had burned my fingers. Suddenly, everything clicked into a new, terrifying focus. The lies, the secrets, the hushed phone calls with his brother, the gut-wrenching sobs in the kitchen. Ben wasn't lying to protect himself from me. He was lying to protect me from something else. The lie wasn't about money. It wasn't about another woman. The lie was about me. It was about my father. And it was about a dangerous man who had just crawled out of the past, looking for revenge. The world tilted, and the floor seemed to fall away beneath me. I was on my hands and knees in Ben's office, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I never knew my father had lived. The smell of old paper filled the air, thick and musty, like a secret that had been locked away for too long. The threatening letter from Morrison lay on the rug, the stark black words, a declaration of war. My father, a software pioneer, a thief, a man on the run? It was all too much, a tidal wave of confusion and fear that left me gasping for air. Just as I was trying to force my scattered thoughts into some semblance of order, I heard the sound of the front door opening. "Chloe, I'm home!" Ben's voice, usually a sound that brought me comfort, now sent a jolt of pure panic through me. I scrambled to gather the papers, my hands shaking so badly that the brittle clippings fluttered to the floor. It was too late. Before I could hide the evidence of my snooping, he appeared in the doorway of the office. He stopped dead. His gaze took in the scene in a single, sweeping glance. Me, kneeling on the floor, my face pale with shock, the open metal box, the scattered documents, the key still dangling from the lock. The color drained from his face. The easy smile he had walked in with vanished, replaced by an expression of utter devastation. He knew. The time for lies was over. "Chloe," he whispered, his voice cracking. He sank to his knees in front of me, his eyes filled with a pain so profound it mirrored the anguish I had seen in the kitchen. "I am so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way." And then, the truth came flooding out. It was a torrent of words, a desperate, broken confession that washed away every lie he had ever told me. My father, he explained, had not been a simple architect. That was a life he had built, a persona he had adopted to hide. Years ago, he had been a brilliant, self-taught software engineer. He and Arthur Morrison had been partners, two young men on the verge of creating something that would make them millionaires. But Morrison, Ben said, was unstable, greedy, and violent. When he tried to force my father to sell their revolutionary patent to a shady corporation, my father refused. Morrison became enraged, threatening him, and my father, fearing for his safety, did the only thing he could think of. He disappeared. He took his work, legally filed the patent under his own name to protect it, and started a new life under a slightly different name, in a quiet town where no one would ever think to look for him. "He wasn't a thief, Chloe," Ben said, his hands gripping mine, his eyes pleading for me to believe him. "He was protecting his work. He was protecting his future family, you." The inheritance my father had left me wasn't just the house and a modest savings account. Hidden within the legal jargon of his will was the ownership of that original, incredibly valuable patent. It had been sitting dormant for 20 years, a secret treasure I never knew I possessed. "Morrison was arrested a few years after your dad disappeared for an unrelated assault charge," Ben continued, his voice low and heavy. "He just got out of prison 3 months ago. He's bitter, he's broke, and he's obsessed. He spent all that time in prison nursing his grudge, convinced your father cheated him. He hired a private investigator and found you." Ben's face crumpled. "He started sending letters, making threats. He wanted money, a lot of it, to go away. I've been trying to handle it. I've been talking to my brother, Daniel, trying to figure out what to do. I've been trying to pay him off, to keep him away from you." His voice broke. "I didn't want to destroy the memory of your father. I didn't want you to live in fear. I was trying to protect you, not deceive you." He looked at me, his face awash with tears. "The phone call you overheard, that was me, telling Daniel I couldn't do it anymore. The weight of the secret, of lying to the person I love most in the world, it was breaking me. I was so terrified of losing you, but I was even more terrified of what would happen if Morrison got to you. The truth, as terrifying as it was, settled over me not with a crash, but with a strange, clarifying calm. The lies were gone. The affair I had imagined, the betrayals I had feared, they were all phantoms. The reality was so much more complex, so much more frightening, but it was real, and in a strange way, it was liberating. He hadn't been lying to hurt me. He had been lying to shield me. The foundation of our marriage wasn't built on sand after all. It was just built on a secret fault line that had finally, violently, ruptured. The truth settled in the quiet space between us, vast and terrifying, but also strangely freeing. The lies were gone. The imaginary girlfriend, the phantom financial loss, all the ugly scenarios I had tortured myself with evaporated, replaced by a single, real, and present danger. For the first time in weeks, we were a team again, our hands clasped together amidst the scattered secrets of my father's past. We spent the rest of the evening talking, piecing together the broken fragments of our two realities into one shared, solid truth. The next day, the threat ceased to be a ghost story and became a reality. A sleek black car I didn't recognize pulled up to our curb. A man got out. He was older, with a thin, wiry frame and a face that seemed etched with a permanent, bitter sneer. His eyes, small and dark, scanned our house with a hungry, possessive glare. It was Morrison. Ben saw him first. He was instantly on his feet, moving to stand between me and the front window. "Stay back, Chloe," he said, his voice a low, protective growl. Before we could react, Morrison was on our porch, his fist pounding on the front door. "I know you're in there," he shouted, his voice raspy and thin, but laced with a chilling menace. "We have things to discuss. Your father's debts are long overdue." Ben's instinct was to shield me, to face the danger alone. He was ready to be the wall, the sacrifice, anything to keep me safe. But as he reached for the door handle, I put my hand on his arm, stopping him. A new kind of strength, a strength I inherited from the brilliant man who had lived a lie to protect me, surged through me. My father wasn't just a man who ran, he was a man who planned. He had been a brilliant engineer, a creator of complex systems, and he had always told me, "The best systems always have a back door, a hidden failsafe." "Wait," I whispered, my mind racing. I ran back to the office and grabbed the original patent document from the pile, the one that had been legally filed and notarized. I remembered my father teaching me to read contracts, to always look at the fine print, the addendums. My eyes scanned the dense legal text, and then I saw it. Tucked away at the very end, under a section titled Contingency Clauses, was a small, elegantly worded paragraph. It was a poison pill. The clause was simple and devastatingly clever. It stated that in the event of a forced transfer of ownership, if the patent was ever signed over under threat, duress, or coercion, the intellectual property rights would be immediately and irrevocably dissolved. The patent would become public domain. It would be worthless to everyone. A slow smile spread across my face. It was my father's final move in a chess game he had started 20 years ago. I walked back to the front door, the document in my hand. "Let's answer it," I said to a confused but trusting Ben. He opened the door. Morrison stood there, a triumphant, ugly sneer on his face. "Finally," he hissed. "Now, about what you owe me." He started to push his way inside, but Ben blocked his path. "You're not getting anything, Mr. Morrison," I said calmly from behind my husband. Morrison's eyes narrowed, focusing on me. "You have something that belongs to me, little girl. Give me the patent documents or sign over a check for $5 million, and I'll disappear." "I don't think so," I said, holding up the document. I explained the poison pill clause, my voice steady and clear. "You see, the moment you force me to sign anything, this patent becomes worthless. You'll get nothing. My father made sure of that." His face contorted with rage. The mask of a cunning businessman fell away, revealing the violent thug underneath. He had spent decades fantasizing about this payday, and I had just snatched it away. With a raw scream of fury, he lunged, not at Ben, but at me, his hands outstretched like claws, going for the document. Ben reacted instantly, tackling Morrison with the full force of his body. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, but just as Morrison was raising a fist to strike, the front door burst open again. 2 uniformed police officers stormed in, their weapons drawn. "Police! Don't move!" I had called them the moment I saw Morrison's car pull up, my phone hidden in my pocket. They had been waiting at the end of the street. They pulled a struggling Morrison off of Ben and slapped handcuffs on his wrists. His recorded threats at the door, combined with the blatant assault, were more than enough. The danger was over. Later that night, the house was finally quiet again. Ben sat beside me on the sofa, his hand gently tracing the bruise that was already forming on his cheekbone. "Chloe," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "can you ever forgive me for lying?" I looked at my husband, at the man who had been willing to fight, to lie and to crumble under the weight of it all, just to protect me. Our perfect life had been a beautiful lie, a storybook existence built to shield me from a harsh reality. But now, the lies were gone. We were left with the truth, messy and complicated as it was. I took his hand in mine. "There's nothing to forgive," I said. "Now we can start building something real, together."